Good morning, everybody. This way, okay? I'm good, okay. Good morning, everybody. I would like to welcome our special guest to this event of the Gauteng Health Department of Health in liaison with the Premier's Advisory Committee. Today will be a very informative session where our guests are going to share their journey that they had during the COVID-19. I will give over to our MEC that will give more details. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. They call it is a Monday morning. Usually they call it Blue Mondays. But I prefer that we start off the week on a good footing. And I think today's topic lends itself very much to a story of hope, a story of victory in the midst of a storm in the pandemic that we faced with. Many of you would know that just in the month of March, we only had about 6 cases reported on the 6th of March, which has now phenomenally grown to more than 500,000 infections in a space of about 6 months. This makes you think, doesn't it, about how the world could change at just a drop of a hat, at a drop of a pen. You close your eyes, you blink, you open them, the world has changed around us. We have been under lockdown, level 5, 4, 3. We are currently under lockdown, level 2. The story of COVID-19 is not a little story. It's a big story because many lives have been lost. Many families have been put under great distress. We have been put as a country in a distraught situation, and yet we remain victorious. The numbers tell the story. We are now sitting on 86% recovery rate as opposed to what we had when the pandemic began growing. We are today sitting with a panel of people who have a story to tell, both here and online, who have a story to tell from different walks of life. They will tell their story. I will not be telling it for them, but I'll be definitely asking how they made it through such a stressful condition. Novel virus, COVID-19. Many people have lost their lives, and I want to underscore this. Many people have lost their lives. Many families have been put into disarray with breadwinners dying and losing income, not just because of breadwinners dying, but because we were thrown into an economic vortex when the lockdowns were pronounced by the president of the country. Now I will ask that each of our guests introduces themselves briefly to the people online who are joining us today so that they may know you before we get on to the conversation. This is going to be a conversation, and I think it's going to be a conversation more of faith and hope more than it's going to be a dark conversation of hopelessness. And your story is important to tell because many out there may be gripped by fear, but your story will lend itself to bringing hope where there may be hopelessness. Let me first begin by our respondent to introduce herself. Prof, introduce yourself to the viewers and let them know who you are.
Good morning, viewers. Thank you so much for availing yourselves. An event like this wouldn't happen without you. Let me go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Professor Kiolebogile Motaung. I'm the Assistant Dean for Research in the Faculty of Science at Tshwane University of Technology, and I'm also the chairperson of the Provincial Research Committee, and I'm also the advisory to the Premier Advisory Member. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. On my immediate left, kindly introduce yourself to our audience.
Okay. Good morning to everyone out there and here. My name is Tandiwe Machaelo. I am employed by the Department of Health for the past 20 odd years. At the time that the pandemic happened, I got deployed to the SLN Park in Transnet in Ekurhuleni as a facility manager. So for the past 6 months, that's where I was deployed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On my almost far left.
Okay, my name is Letlhogonolo Manyoha. I am a student at Tshwane University of Technology. I am currently pursuing my BTech in biotechnology, and I am representing the youth and students that have survived COVID. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Rev, introduce yourself.
Good morning to everyone. My name is Reverend Zwelithini Nimbambo. I'm currently stationed in Vereeniging under the Methodist Church of the Southern Africa. Yes.
We also have online with us two panelists who are not physically present with us. I'll request that Dr. Dikobe introduces herself to everyone who's joining us today. Dr. Dikobe? We can't hear you. I think you've muted your mic. Mute your mic.
Mute. Yes. Hello. I'm sorry about that. So I'm Dr. Lerato, and I'm a psychiatrist by profession, based in Tshwane, namely Centurion and the Pretoria North area.
Thank you so much. We also have Mr. Ramuhemi, who's joining us online. Kindly introduce yourself quickly, sir.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ramuhemi Mutsekwa. I'm working as a financial and admin manager for the Department of Roads and Transport in Gauteng.
For the introduction. So on our panel, we have a psychiatric doctor, we have a reverend, we have a student, we have a public servant in the Department of Health who are going to share with us their stories and have conversations about how they managed to survive COVID-19. And as the topic today speaks to that purpose, we are speaking about surviving COVID to survivors of COVID. And you may imagine that the circumstances of each and every one of these individuals differs immensely. And obviously their approach would have been from various perspectives. And this is what we are going to try and do. And let me first start off by speaking to Mempo here, who will give us a perspective, because firstly, she would have managed a center of quarantine and then isolation. But let me quickly, before dealing with you, let me quickly jump to our student who will give us a perspective of someone who is a student pursuing a career through studies and who would have had an encounter with the novel virus. Can you just take us through your story, ma'am, quickly?
So basically what happened was an aunt of mine tested positive for COVID, and we were in contact with her. My father and I were in contact with her. And then we also went to go test, and we found out we were positive. The thing about testing positive is that you think there's a cure, you think there's something, you think they'd give you a glimmer of hope or something that you can hold on to, that you can use, but there was nothing of that nature. So there was no medication you can get to. You just have to, what I was told by my doctor was treat your symptoms, treat them as they come. And that was very difficult, because if your frame of mind is not where it's supposed to be, you start imagining symptoms that might not even be there. So you have to clear your head and ensure that whatever that you are feeling is what you're feeling, and is truly that. So we tested positive, and my father and I had to get rid of my siblings, my younger brother and sister. So they had to go and live with somebody else, and it just had to be the two of us. Isolation, people would think that because both of us tested positive, we can still be in the same space around each other. And we could not have that interaction with each other. So we had to isolate from each other, which is very difficult because we're very close we'd get to talk. You need someone to be there for you as you're going through this. It's not a virus that you can deal with single-handedly, and now you have to deal with it from a distance with someone, and that was very difficult. So we had to deal with that, deal with getting medication that, because honale was this lengana, there's lerumo la madi, and you cannot physically go out to get it because now you're afraid to expose other people to it. You have to stay in and wait for someone to deliver, and you're reliant on people that are outside. And it was, to overcome it, I had to have a good support structure and people around me that were willing to help and do so. It was very difficult, so to say. I think my father and I were very blessed because in as much as we lived together, we had 2 separate bathrooms. We just shared the kitchen, and one had to wait for the other to go to the kitchen and then come back. And you just rely on hearing or shouting, or, "Mpho, I'm done. Mpho, you can go to the kitchen now." And you have to sanitize and clean in between using spaces that we are around together. So that was very difficult, I would have to say.
And so what would have been the measures you would have taken to ensure that you do not have a possible reinfection? Because as a carrier of the virus, you would obviously have the possibility of leaving it on surfaces, where in your living spaces. What would have been the precautions you would have taken?
So with using the kitchen, because that was the one place that we used together, we had to sanitize in between using it. So if I get in, I have to sanitize as if he didn't sanitize before leaving. So because I am a science student, I have worked in the lab. So it's just the same thing as when you get into the lab, you sanitize, you clean as if nobody has cleaned before you, because you don't trust that there was proper cleaning done. You have to do it yourself. So I'd have to clean, even though he's cleaned before he left, I'd have to clean the packages that I have to use, that I know that he could possibly use. So you just sanitize in between everything. And even with the packages that we receive, we have to sanitize and make sure that they're clean.
And so basically you use disposables.
Yes.
Instead of your usual utensils in the house.
When we use like our normal utensils, we'd use jig and wash, like clean properly, thoroughly. So I could not wash whatever my dad's dishes. I'd have to wash my own and make sure that it's clean before he could do so himself.
What would you say was the scariest moment for you while you were dealing with the virus?
I think the scariest moment was realizing how life is so precious, because in as much as the recovery rate is in favor of you once you get tested, you just don't know whether you'll be on the surviving side of life or not. And just knowing that in a short space of time, you could lose your life if you're not careful, if you don't take the right medication, if you don't take care of yourself. It was just that, and having a glimmer of hope, knowing that I have so much more to live for, was what kept me going, knowing that my obituary is still so small. It's just a BTech student. I can't pass on as a BTech student only. There's other things I need to pursue and get to, and I'm too young to pass on, so it's just that. And the other thing was just worrying so much so about my father, because you wouldn't want to live, but the person that you're going through this with does not get the opportunity to do so. And because of age and the fact that he's older than me and he could be at risk was just also very scary, understanding that I could also just reinfect him rather than me being reinfected. I could reinfect him and put his life in danger, and that was a very saddening part of it, knowing that I could be a danger to my own father.
Now, there have been conceptions that have been shared over a few months of the pandemic. One of them is that people of a certain age are not at risk, especially for fatalities. And here you are, you were in the same house isolating with your father, who is in an age bracket where it would be said, you get it, you're gone. How much of that occupied your mind while you were dealing with your own infection?
I would say a majority of the time I was worried for my father. And I think only after conquering the virus, we had conversations about how we were not totally honest with each other with partakes to how we feel on certain days. Because he'd ask me how I'm doing. I would not tell him I have a headache or my body is painful. I'd just say, I'm okay. We are winning. Mister, here, Pambili, we are going. And then for him, he'd also do the same, whereas we were not open and honest to each other about that. And the mere fact that people think that because you're a certain age, you might not pass on it, or it will not affect you as it would other people, it does not make sense, because with underlying conditions, some people only find out when it's too late. Like for instance, I lost my mom and we found out she had sugar diabetes later on, before she passed on. It might be young, and these underlying conditions don't have an age bracket. They don't have this, oh, you're 22. Yes, they might affect people that are much older, but they also do affect people that are younger. And it's a very ignorant point of view to look at things, saying, I'm young, I could conquer this, I could do that. But the people around you, you're not sure about their medical conditions, what they have. And a lot of these underlying conditions are conditions that people keep to themselves. They're very confidential statuses that you cannot say. So you can assume someone is not HIV, but they probably are, and it could affect them more than it has affected you. So you can't be selfish about it.
I think yours is a story that demonstrates to us the impact that this virus would have had on two varying age groupings, and how the possibility of going through it exists regardless of the fact that you are of a particular age. Let's now move on to the good doctor, Dr. Lerato Dikobe Kalane. Are you here with us?
I am. I'm just going to attempt to share my slides, if my technology allows me. It looks like there's something, right? Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So as previously said, I'm a psychiatrist in private practice in the Pretoria South area and Pretoria North area. So working in the healthcare sector, when our president announced lockdown, I could not lock down because I was a frontliner. And I was those enthusiastic frontliners, who went out gallantly every morning. And, we had to go for training on how to don, which is put on, and doff, which is take off of the PPE when we enter hospital spaces. We had to find, and work on protocols on how to protect ourselves and protect our patients, and how to give ongoing emotional support for people who are isolated because of this dreaded virus. So, going in there, having taken my Hippocratic oath, for me to then get infected, honestly, was not the biggest challenge for me. My biggest emotional challenge was when my patients, whom I thought I had been protecting, tested positive. So I call this my entanglement with COVID-19. So in the hospital where I used to work, we used to test patients when they came into hospital for mental health issues, be it depression and anxiety. But I was always advocating the pre-admission testing, rather than testing when admitted, because of precisely for that risk. So when on the 2nd of July, 8 of my patients that I had admitted 2.5 weeks prior with negative results tested positive the day before I had to discharge them. For me, that was a huge emotional letdown, because I had thought that I had taken all the precautions possible to protect them by having them tested before, and by advocating to the hospital that I used to work for before. But when those measures were not followed, and it culminated in what I had warned would happen. It was a major letdown. So I had tested my patients because there was an outbreak in that particular hospital that was kept hush-hush. I don't know what the motive was for keeping it secret, but I broke the silence and I told my patients that, look, guys, there is an outbreak in the hospital and you are due to go home tomorrow. I cannot ethically allow you to go home without knowing if your status is still negative or not. And so I had to move major hurdles to have them tested. And when I was awoken on the Friday morning by emails at 5 o'clock with all their results being positive, for me, I think that was the most emotional thing for me. Anyway, when I tested them, I also tested myself, and my results initially came back negative. So I don't know if my slide is very clear. So I was negative on the 2nd and 3rd of July when 8 out of my 9 patients tested positive. I now had to break the news to my patients that, guys, yes, 2.5 weeks ago, we did the right thing. We tested and we came in negative to deal with our emotional issues and personal stresses. But now the situation has changed and we need to go back home. I had to look at issues of, can they isolate safely at home? How big are their homes? Who do they live with? Those that were living with elderly relatives, is there a way that we could take Gugu on Dademoholu to go and live with another relative for a while you are quarantining? Those that have little children, can we move the children to their aunties or uncles for the 2 weeks while you're going to isolate? And then who's going to take care of you? So we had to take care of all those logistics. We had to look at, isolating at home versus isolating in a quarantine facility. So anyway, I then set up, so we had to share all the emotions. So everyone was very anxious, depressed, everyone was in a state of panic. And I thought, you know what, I think at that time I had such guilt feelings that I was the one that brought them to this facility, and I am now letting them go back home with this virus. So I had to do what I needed to do to try and contain them. So I set up a support group for the patients using WhatsApp, set up a WhatsApp support group with the promise that we were all going to keep each other alive for the next 14 days. Anyway, had to phone families, put measures into place, and then everyone was discharged. Those patients of mine who were newly admitted, those that maybe were not suicidal or were not acutely psychotic, I had to take the decision to discharge all of them and then go into self-quarantine because now I was a positive contact, even though I had tested negative. Lo and behold, 3 days into my quarantine for being a positive contact, I started getting sick. I developed what initially felt like flu-like symptoms, but 2 days later, this flu felt weird. Something was off. And I got a call from the pathologist who had conducted the tests on my patients that were positive, just a courtesy call checking how I was, am I emotionally okay? I should not blame myself. So she was giving me that support, which we are all supposed to be giving each other. And I said to her, you know what, girl, I'm not feeling so hot. I'm fluish. I'm getting chills. And I'm very tired. I had no energy. And she said, you know what, Lerato, you actually could be positive. It's possible that when you tested 4 days ago, your viral load was not high enough to be picked up by the test. Just go and test again. Went and I tested, and lo and behold, the results came back positive. Now, at that stage, I had to call a family meeting with my husband and my children and my helper to tell them that not only is mommy quarantining because she had been in contact with positive patients, but now mommy has now tested positive for COVID-19. So I had to go into self-isolation. This is not the original sign, but my children printed a sign called COVIDville, Coronaville, and they put it on the door of my bedroom just so that everyone could be reminded that you can't just rock in and out of mommy's bedroom as you liked. We had to put a table outside my door where there was sanitizer, so that if they brought us food or anything that I needed, they could leave it on the table outside. And then when I was done using my things, I could put them there. We had to get, basically full PPE for our helper, so that she could just continue assisting me. And one of my biggest symptoms that I had was the exceptional fatigue. I had energy to do nothing. And when I share this with friends and with my patients, that, when breathing takes up too much energy, it's easier to just stop breathing than to inhale. That's how tired I was. My sense of taste and smell was not gone. Instead, I was exceptionally hungry. But chewing food was such work. And I'm a meataholic. I love meat. So I was suffering. At some point, they thought, let them maybe just blend my meat and I can have my meat as a soup. But just carrying the spoon, the spoon was so heavy, getting myself from my bed to my bathroom. It was such a mission because I had no energy. Mpho touched earlier on treatment. What do you use? Where do you get treatment? Is there a cure? And no, there is no cure. It's treated symptomatically. And I think my advantage is that I am a medical doctor. So I do know how viruses behave in the body and that they don't have cures. We just treat them symptomatically. So this was my COVID-19 survival kit. I had everything. My vitamin C, my zinc. I had Vicks to rub my chest when it was painful. I had to drink my ginger, lemon, honey tea. Yes, I also used to inhale with Lingana, and twice a day I used to drink a very diluted concentrate of the solution for its use. But as an African child, having brought up by partly your grandmother, that in winter when you had the sniffles and it was you and a whole bunch of cousins, Nkgono would make you drink this bitter concoction and then say, just pretend it's tea, and then you realize that actually you were drinking Lingana all the time. So this is what I used to survive. And because of my medical background, I knew to check my oxygen saturation levels. So I had bought an oxygen pulse oximeter. I had a humidifier, and then what is there to do during the day when you don't have the energy to do anything? So I had my headphones, and then my phone was my best friend, watching movies, Netflix, because even if I tried to do academic work, my brain had this fog around it. I had what they call brain fog, where you can't think or concentrate. So it was easier just to vegetate on a good movie. And then also, because I think my advantage is that I am a medical doctor, and I know that, when people get admitted into hospital, it's because they need oxygen support. So, I have advantage point that I was able to purchase an oxygen concentrator, which is that big machine on the floor. I had my BP machines, my pulse oximeter, that small little, I don't know how to use my arrow, that small little contraption on the ground that has a little red ball, that's a spirometer. That helps to strengthen your breathing muscles. So I had to do those exercises, checking my temperature now and again. And by the way, I had no fever. I just had chills and rigors now and again. And then every 24 hours, we had to fog our bedroom. So we had to buy a fogging machine. So I was advantaged in that sense that I could afford to put all these measures in place, and I had the information to do that. And so I could then successfully self-isolate at home and without actually endangering the rest of my family members. But just in closing, I think above all things, with all things said, my biggest saving grace was the Magnificat. And being Catholic, I relied heavily on my faith, because when you are isolating and that this virus It's either way. You know, our young student Mpo said that so many things go through your mind. It's either you die or the virus dies. So it's a huge mental warfare. And if you don't have faith on your side, I don't know how else you could survive it. And so in closing, this for me was my biggest saving grace. So life has changed because, yes, I am a psychiatrist and I treat people with mental health issues. And one of the issues that I help people with is anxiety. I'm left with a lot of anxiety, where I've now had to change how I work. I now have a new normal. I now no longer see patients physically. Outpatients, I consult with them, you know, at virtual consultations. I only go into the hospital where I know that patients have been tested negative. I've subsequently left the hospital where I got it.
It appears we have lost the connection on Dr. Lerato, but I think we have got the gist of her presentation. And as you can tell, the story of surviving the COVID-19 virus is an emotional one for many. And I'll just take it from where she speaks about her saving grace being depending on her faith, which will lead me to the next panelist, Reverend Zweli. Your story, and you being a man of the cloth, you may relate to what Dr. Lerato mentioned as her saving grace. What was your saving grace?
Good morning.
You tell us your story.
And thank you, MSC. Should I tell my story then?
Yes, proceed.
Okay. I think firstly with me, being married to a health worker, I knew somehow that I was going to get COVID. I knew somehow. It wasn't a secret, so I started researching a lot on it and all that stuff. So when it happened to her, at first I thought it was flu. So after 3 days, I started catching the symptoms. And when I caught the symptoms, she went and tested. And when she tested, actually the results were delayed. And they came back, she tested on a Monday, the results came back on a Friday. I got the symptoms on a Monday. And so I was waiting for her symptoms, for her results to come out. And by then, I was getting sick. And I was busy treating her, while at least I was infected. So I knew that I was infected. And so I would do the concussions and all that stuff and, get all this stuff and everything. And she was getting better, and I wasn't getting better. I was actually getting worse. And my body, apparently, it started rejecting all the vitamin C's, everything and all that stuff. And they were not working with me. And as much as I had all this stuff in the house, they were not working. And most of the times I'll go out and sit outside on the sun and get the vitamin D and all that stuff. But truly, somewhere along the line, because I got tested on a Saturday, her results came Friday, got tested on a Saturday, my results came on Sunday. And during that week before my admission at hospital, I started losing interest in the worldly things. We will sit and watch TV, both of us and everything. TV was meaningless. everything was just meaningless. I couldn't eat. My body was just rejecting most of the things. And she was worried because she could tell that something is happening, I was going to die. And my prayer was always, God, this is not the time. You did not bring me here to die now. We had an arrangement before with God. I had prayed before and made an arrangement that at least at 70 years, when my kids have graduated and all that stuff, you can take me, not now. So I went back and I reminded God on that. But one of my fears was, if I have to go to the hospital now, there is a possibility that my family won't see me again. It's either I'm going to go there and come back dead. And when I come back dead, they're not even going to view my body. It comes back, my coffin will be wrapped in a plastic. So I had that fear. And so, and then I spoke to God and I said, if it is your will, God, that I die, I have to die in this house. And I'm not going to go to the hospital. But this thing was getting stronger and stronger. All the symptoms that people are talking about, the chest pains and everything, I couldn't breathe and all that stuff were happening with me. I'm asthmatic and I'll metabolize, I'll get all the things. My brother brought umhlonyane to me and everything, and that thing was just bitter. And I think I drank it once. And one of the doctors prescribed an antibiotic that I took just one day and I just vomited. And so my body was just rejecting. And so I'll sit at home and then I'll be looking at my family and each and every one and all that stuff. And I found myself being at peace with death. And I wanted to die. But it just happened that on the 18th of July, I just woke my wife in the middle of the night. I think it was around 3 a.m. And I said, wake up, call an ambulance. I'm going to a hospital now. And to tell you the truth, from that time, I never prayed. I was praying for that week, but from that time, I never prayed. I went into the hospital for almost 3 days as I was recovering. I wasn't praying at all. I was just lying there and being present with God. And I know that my wife had packed a lot of books, spiritual books for me, and I never touched them. I didn't want anything to do with God at that moment. But in the back of my mind, I knew that I had a lot of people that were praying for me. And I started getting better. And then she brought me a Bible, and that's when I started reading. I never read those books, but I read the Bible, and I started reading the Bible and everything, and I started recovering in hospital. But then the funny part of it is that when I was sharing with Mpho, when my wife says, are you going to a private hospital? I said, nope, I'm not going to a private hospital. And I have medical aid and everything and all that stuff. I insisted that I wanted to go to Charlotte Maxakga. And when the ambulance guys said the closest hospitals is Para and South Rand, that is where we are going to take you. And I said, tell those guys that they are the ones that are going to go to Para and South Rand. I'm not going there. And I'm sick, I'm dying. And I said, I'm going to Joburg Gen, and that's where I'm going. And at last they obliged. They took me to Joburg Gen, and that's where I went into, and for almost 11 days, I was there recovering in Joburg Gen. Yeah, that's my story.
It's a story of faith as much as it is a story of stubbornness. And what I'm taking away from the story, Rev, is that you depended a lot on your faith as well. And I'm picking up that you saying you had a conversation with God about an arrangement you had with Him. And I'm speaking, having this conversation, well aware that not everyone has the same faith. But the faith that you hold dear to your heart and the conversations you have had with divinity and God, you had to go back to them to give you strength to live through this infection. And it is very peculiar to note that even throughout your own infection, you were still holding on to the hope of an arrangement you had made with deity. And the point I took away from when you started is that you took care of your wife while you yourself were experiencing symptoms. That must not have been an easy thing to do. We know in this society that seems to lean over to patriarchy, it is the women who take care of the men and not vice versa. And it is very commendable to see that you took it upon yourself to be the one taking care of her while you also experienced these symptoms. And also, the fact that no medication seemed to work. So what did you think? At the point your body is rejecting all this medicine, what are you thinking? Are you thinking, ay, nyahambala, I'm a goner?
I think that's what I thought. That's what I thought. And she needed to be better for the boys, for the kids. There was no point at any point that both of us were going to die. One of us needed to go. And so hence I had to invest myself in saving her so that she can remain behind, taking care of the home and the boys and everything and all that stuff. With me, I think somewhere along the line, I've never feared death. I've never feared death. And to a point, when I was explaining this to her is on Saturday the 18th, when I asked her to call an ambulance and all that moment, and I said, do you know that was a time when actually I separated my soul and my body were separated, and I could look at myself lying there on the bed as if I was standing and as if I was a second person. And so I knew that I was dying then, but I had no fear of death. I knew that she feared death. Even now she fears death. For her, she needed to remain behind. And so for me to die, it was going to be a saving grace for her to begin to be very strong in prayer and all that stuff. So I was comfortable. For me, I was going back to my place, to home, and because heaven is home. I knew that I wasn't going to go anywhere. I was going to go to heaven because everything was just white. So I was comfortable with death. But somewhere along the line, on that Saturday, when I made a decision, nope, I'm not going to die. And I said, call an ambulance.
Now you're living in a house, you have children. How do you isolate yourself from the children to avoid them getting the infection in the same household, seeing that both parents have caught the virus?
My boys, they stay on the other side of the house. So they made sure that they ran away from us. They were very scarce. So we stay on the other side of the house. And so each and every time they will come in, it's just to greet us and everything, and they disappear and, and stay in their rooms. So that's how we separated. They had their TVs, we had our TV. So
And I can imagine that this thing almost instantly changes living arrangements with the people who are very close to you. And the consideration is that, let me save their lives. But their concern is that, will yours be saved? And you are living in the same house. And I can imagine the stress and tension that it causes on people's emotions. And I can tell with Dr. Lerato and how she was responding emotionally to her story, that many of you might have had to deal with so much emotion at it. Let me move quickly to Metandiwe, who managed, as I said in the beginning, a facility of people who were either suspected of, and I need you to, while you're telling your story, just explain to our audience the difference between quarantine and isolation. And I think many people do not understand the difference between the two, quarantining and isolation. Perhaps the difference is small, but maybe someone needs to understand. Also, we're hearing self-isolation, quarantine. What's the difference in any case? Metandiwe.
Thank you, Program Director. Start by loving the fact that I've been referred to as Import twice today.
Yes.
From the Program Director and from the Rev as well. And literally in translation is gift. So I'm starting in the viewpoint that life is a gift. And for me to be still alive today is because of the same gift. I take it's prophetically. As I'm employed in the Department of Health, and I was the facility manager for the Esalen Park, it started as a quarantine, where we had the repatriates coming from all the countries. We had more than 10 countries coming on site. And these were the people who had to be housed there for 14 days. And within the 14 days, we had to test them and hope they are negative and go home. You know? And in the same note, quarantine, it's when you are a PUI, a person under investigation, or in a rough language, we'll say you are a suspect. And I normally say to people who are suspect, so this is when ulilikinza, because maybe you had a close contact with anybody, a workplace or anywhere else, with people who are positive. So that we can give the virus a chance to maybe show the symptoms that you are as well positive or not. So we would quarantine you for 14 days. And initially, when we started then in April, in the 14 days, then people will be tested. And 8 out of the many, we had 200 and something people on site at that time, 8 out of them tested positive, which was the first, because people have been testing negative and going. We took it for granted that now when they are positive, we send them to hospital. They are sick, they have to be hospitalized. And I won't mention the hospital name as I'm a public servant. They were brought back because they said hospital is for sick people. We're not going to keep them there because they were not sick. They were asymptomatic. They did not have symptoms, yet they tested positive. This is when then we had to make a decision as the management to say, what are we doing with them? We can't keep them in the same hotel side with those that are not tested. They are still suspects. We decided then, even if a lodge that was a bit far off from the original one, which I know other people will never even go to that site. I won't mention names again because it was termed like it's for positive people and people who are contagious. So we were, needless to say, in South Africa, we were the first site to house positive people. And this is when we termed it isolation. When we have tested positive and you have to be isolated from everyone else and even other positive people so that there's no reinfection. So we had a site which was quarantine and the site that was isolation. But with time, just to finish the story of the site before I tell my story, because I think it will come at the end, we now started even having people locally that they were turning positive. The numbers were increasing, as we said. We started with only 6 in March, and then the numbers went to more than 500,000. There were a lot of those people, so we had to start admitting them on site. And I'm not sure how it came about, and I'm happy one of the seniors have come through, that the national COVID line had my number. When they would phone the national COVID line, whoever is on the other side would give my number. Obviously, we had 3 sites then, and I'll try, maybe people are not answering. Maybe I was answering all calls 24 hours. So I ended up literally being the contact person nationally for people who test positive.
Must have been a busy line.
Yeah, extremely busy. I'm still advised because I still have calls. That's why right now I made sure I switch it off and put it away because I still have calls even to date. And the calls were not only from Gauteng province, they were from other provinces as well. Who wanted isolation. But they were as well outside the province, you know. Or on a particular day, I got a call from Botswana because the Botswana government had wanted this person to go because this person tested positive. So they wanted to bring this person to isolate in Esalen Park. So they wanted me to send maybe location so that they can have the quotation for the ambulance all the way from Botswana to here. And I said, no, it's not for me to decide that and channeled appropriately. So that meant I was extremely busy. And literally 24 hours because people from other countries as well who want to come and repatriate, they would phone and want to know what are the procedures here. And they are on a different timeline. So it was like literally a 24-hour service for me, with a cellular phone, which I had to bear it because it's a governmental phone and I'm a public servant. But then, needless to say, that was wearing me off. I was getting exhausted beyond measure. I was getting extremely tired. I think it was on the 3rd or 4th month. Extremely tired, exhaustion. And as a facility manager, I'm like the last person. The last bag remains with me for everything that happens on site, even on the medical, the nursing, the catering, and I didn't want any so-called food poisoning there. So the kitchen was strict according to the rules, you know, from entry, and I would never see anybody like us not wearing masks because we are distancing. It was like, I'll roar like a lioness. I caught myself in Jovugas. That no one on my facilities allowed not to have a mask. So we were adhering very closely and very strictly to the protocols of having a mask and social distancing and sanitizing strictly. And I got introduced to the vitamins that everybody was talking about here. And we were preventing, prevention is better than cure. Preventing and drinking all the vitamins that are there, from vitamin D to C, A, B, C, D, and the multivit and the B. And garlic started smelling nice. And I started saying, jokingly, as you are laughing at the moment, saying, if I pass next to you, you're not smelling like me, then it means you are defaulting. Because if we all smell the same, then nobody will go, when you pass. So we had all that concoction. We went even to an extent where the kitchen was preparing it for everyone on site, even the clients that we had. So it was a name of a game. Well, I just missed Olengana, and thank God now that I'm hearing it so bitter. I'm not going that route. So it was that hectic. And I have rounds and we go everywhere. And at a particular time, now that when I contracted, the whole site, isolation, let's say Esalen Park was now 100% isolation. We didn't even have the PUIs. We didn't have those who are still under investigation. Every client that was there. So we were known, and we had all people from different sectors. And we relaxed maybe a bit, I should say, because we tried to look back as to how did that happen. We're thinking maybe now when we are in the kitchen, you're taking off your mask, you're relaxing, you're not sanitizing as much as you are. You're here for 5 months, you think you know now how the virus works and all that, because we were testing so frequently. I think I tested negative more than 3 times. And I developed flu symptoms, mildly as it was, but it escalated and it got worse. I'm in a center where we had the at least a basic medication, not your highest schedules. So they gave me all the antibiotics. I was well managed. We have Cuban doctors on site, we have nurses on site, we have primary health care. I was given all the relevant medication to deal with flu. At some point, I know I even had a high dose of antibiotics to try and kill this quickly because now they need me on site, I stayed on site. Immediately, I developed the flu-like symptoms. I quarantined myself. I moved away from moving around the center. Everything that I was doing it within my room. And I was privileged that I had a presidential suite where there was a boardroom separate from the room with a door and everything. So if there's any communication, anybody will have to go through the boardroom, leave it there and what, and then everything will be in the room. I'll be in my room. Food was served to me through the boardroom. So we were trying to avoid contact as much as possible, not to infect people with flu, because we know the symptoms of flu are similar to that. But on day number 7, I still had flu and it was extreme. And I was now extremely sick, very weak, very exhausted, and denying a lot. I was a lot in denial, because I know one of my Cuban doctors started saying, maybe now is the onset. And I'm like, it can't be. You'll be surprised if I tell you that they were doing, okay, your temperature twice a day, and it was well. It had never been up to at least 37, never. It was below 36 every time when they would check my temperature as what we use for screening. They will do the SATs, your saturation. They were also very high at 99. Which is, the maximum is 100, so just there. So everything else, there was no clear symptoms to COVID that we know that is listed, but just flu symptoms. So even when I was losing the smell, I took it's the nose that is blocked. Even when I was losing the taste, I took it's because, when you have flu, you don't feel like eating, you lose your appetite. But this appetite felt as if there were lemons that were squeezed right in my tongue. I was feeling like maybe Mpo said to go out and get lengana. For me, I was like, I wish I could get maybe Glycerin, like, a baby, when your tongue is white and what, they would scrub it with Glycerin or cod liver oil, whatever the children use. But I wanted that Glycerin, it will even change the taste. But I can't go out and I can't even tell them to go get it for me, because I thought it doesn't make sense. I've never had any of our clients there, because they were to me a referral. I have had more than 1,000 clients who went out of that site well. Even those who developed symptoms, they went out well, because we had our oxygen, we had drip, we had all that. Going forward, maybe to say this, I'm a therapist by profession, I'm a social worker by profession, so I leaned a lot on a personal self-talk. I would change my mindset. At the same time, I got to understand how, I'm talking about now when I tested positive. After 7 days, the symptoms of flu are worse. Now they tested me 2 days down the line, I got the results. And the results came positive, and it was like, wow. And we knew that if I'm positive, the people who are working around me will end up positive and all that. And it worked like that. I think 4 of my staff members ended up being positive at that time. And well, my mom is a medical person, and she has this philosophy that there's nothing wrong talking to yourself, or to the chair, or to the car, or to the cat. Actually, the problem is if you hear that thing talking back to you. And when it starts talking back to you, then there is a catastrophe, because you're hearing voices. But it's normal to talk to these things. In the new normal, it is called thinking out loud. I'm talking of an intellectual on pension now. So I knew that now I'm alone in the room, and I start talking to myself, and and I realized that. But at some stage, I started realizing that there is somebody who's talking back to me in here, which I could feel now. I'm starting to hear voices. Among other reasons, among other things why I was hearing these voices is because I had in my chest fire. Not just fire, I'm talking imbaula. I'm talking hot coals, where you will allow them to be red roy, and then you hoy them just in here. They are burning, which is when I said to Matron, what is COVID? I think this is COVID, is not flu. This is when I tested. So it was hot. And because I'm having this shortness of breath, when I get a chance to gasp and get the air inside, it's like kifutswela mullo. It's getting even more hot. And when the fire is getting more hot, I could feel it's coming out through my feet. It was hot. When I'm in the room there, especially at night, I know somebody said, how does it know night? I don't know my colleagues if they experience the same. But when it's at night, it gets worse. So when I'm sleeping at night, I am hot. But when I undress, I am cold. It was a bit confusing there. But then I started hearing voices that, you know, you are so hot. Why don't you just undress and be naked? Go outside and freshen yourself. And I could, this is not a normal thinking. It's now impacting on my mental health. And I have had at least 3 clients who ended up with a psychiatrist in admission. So I started to understand, this is how it was happening. And this is why every of the 3 that we had, we'll find them naked there because they are burning up like that. But my question was okay, hot as I am, where am I going to pass? I've got securities, I've got nurses, I've got everybody there. What are they going to say? I'm just going out naked. And there was a plan where it's you can just put on a gown and when you're outside, you stay naked. And one of them did that. That they would go outside when it's time to walk, and when they get outside, they undress. It's impacting on the mental health, and I experienced that as well. My faith helped me when it came to that, because I had to stay there and do deliverance to myself. I said I had personal self-talk, now deliverance. And maybe I should declare, I am an ordained pastor as well.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, thank God I didn't have to bring that. I was, no, because I'm not here as that, but it things somehow going through. Okay, I'm just, now I had to realize now deliverance is needed. Now prayer is needed. Now I have to be strong on my faith because I was motivating people. I was there, I was sharing that I was maybe wearing a cap of being a manager. I was wearing a cap of being a therapist, a cap of being a pastor, and we would have services there because at least it was in the outside and motivating. And I'll have responses. Somebody would say, it's the faith and the motivation that helped me. Now it's me, it's my turn. And this is what makes me emotional. And I hope I won't break. That when people were sick, I was the spiritual counselor. When people were sick, I was the therapist. Even refer them. When people were sick, I was there as a manager because when people have complaints and this, now it's my turn, no one is doing all 3 for me. I have to do. So it was my faith that made me pull through.
Your story sounds very intense because of the fact that you started off managing a facility where people were suspected of being positive with the virus. And secondly, you yourself having managed that facility, then get the virus, and then you have to deal with overcoming the strain that you are undergoing because of the virus. And I think there's a common thread in the stories that we've heard, and I will jump quickly to Ntatera Mohemi, who's online with us, to also share his story before we have the rest of the conversation. Just to hear your story, Ntatera Mohemi, introduce yourself to our audience here who joining us online, and tell your story as a person who is in the financial industry. And I think one of the things that has come out clear during this pandemic is how it has wreaked havoc in people's finances. And I make this comment because you are in the financial sector, and how people have recovered with their health but might not have recovered economically and with their own finances because of the effects of having to go through lockdown, businesses closing down, and all of that. Ntatera Mohemi, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I contracted the virus after my sister's funeral in June. And when we came back to the house, some 3-4 days later, my wife was also ill, as well as my child. But they were not as ill as all that because I took care of them in the process, and they eventually got cured. But in the process, I also became ill to a point where we decided that let's all of us go to the doctor and see what kind of treatment we can get, because we've been taking all these other medications that we had in the house, but they were not helping us in any way. So then we went to the doctor and we presented to him all the symptoms and all that. But we had thought he would recommend that we must go for testing, although I was a bit skeptical about going for testing because at the time I thought it wasn't COVID, it was something else. However, after he gave us a 3-day antibiotic treatment, it never worked with me. And on the 4th day, I told my wife and daughter that, look, this that I'm feeling are symptoms of the virus. Therefore, I think we should isolate. We should sleep separately and take it from there to see how far we can go. And then on the 5th day, I began the program of taking all these other concoctions, ginger, lemon, and the like. And what worried us the most was that we've been sticking to the guidelines as given or recommended by everyone else of sanitizing and trying all other means that are supposed to be there as far as trying to avoid this. So it couldn't work with me. And on the 5th day, as I said, I began the Panado program as well, because I was feeling very cold on my back from the neck downwards. So it got so worse that every night I would change pajamas 4 to 5 times because they were as wet as if they were coming from a bucket of cold water or something. So during that isolation, we began to all not use the same facility at the same time, but I was taken care of more than I had taken care of my wife and child in the earlier stages. And I also decided that nobody else should know about the fact that I'm ill, because being the pillar of strength in the entire family, it was going to create a lot of problems for everyone. The reaction that I anticipated was such that everyone would be devastated and we never know what would happen. So as a result, we kept it between ourselves in the house. There's 3 of us in the house. So we kept it to ourselves until I got better. But it took quite some time and some doing. The mental strength required to survive this is so huge. And fortunately, I'm strong mentally. And that gave motivation to my wife and daughter that, no, if Papa looks like this, at least we can survive, he's not as bad as we think he is. While I knew very well that I was feeling one of the worst experiences that I've had in my life. So slowly I got cured, taking all these other stuff that everyone else has alluded to. And eventually, I think by the 8th day, that's when I felt like, oh my God, this is it. I'm about to die or something, because I felt some very, very painful experience around my kidneys. And I thought, this is what they mean when they say, once your kidneys collapse, then you're dead. But fortunately, I didn't, because in the process, I was taking water, I was taking all these other stuff. So fortunately, it helped. But the pain that I felt around the kidney areas was very extreme and bad. Finally, I got cured, and we all managed to stay together again and have the same arrangement that we had previously prior to my getting ill. So right now, we are living on multivitamins and vitamin C and all of these other stuff. To cut the long story short, I am okay now, and I'm alive and kicking, working from home and doing all these other things. As far as the finance part of things is concerned, we, as a family, had to adjust to the COVID prices. You'd recall that suddenly everything got expensive from the supermarkets and all that. So one had to adjust to that. But the other major part of things was less traveling that we had to indulge in because there was no need and the lockdown was still effective. So we had to enforce more self-discipline in terms of our traveling. But even more, we downscaled on some of the stuff that we had. We reviewed our insurance policies, not with the view of cutting them out, but we reviewed them and we downscaled on what we were covered for. And we also downscaled on the DSTV and other stuff that we are used to. But in the main as well, we had to revisit our balance sheet as a family to look at what is outstanding, what needs to be done as a matter of urgency, and what doesn't need to be done. So we tried to squash as many debts as possible, because that was the worrying factor, that if one were to die with all these debts left, what's going to happen to the family? So fortunately, we are a disciplined group as far as our finances are concerned. So we managed to downscale on all of those, but we kept our debts to a minimum. As far as other people are concerned, we are aware that a lot of people are struggling currently with their finances, given the fact that most have lost their jobs and most have had to, surrender their properties and all that. That which we are reading in the newspapers and we are hearing from other people. So honestly speaking, it's a very difficult route for people to travel. Currently, I have some friends who are in the transport industry and are not coping currently as a result of the lockdown and the COVID-19 effects. Most have decided to close down and they are looking at alternative ways to make a living. And one had only started a business after he had resigned from his job before the lockdown. And that business cannot even start from the very beginning. So unfortunately, it has had such an effect on people's, on the families in particular, because whatever happens to one individual in the house, whether it's the wife or hubby who loses his income, it has a bearing in the family generally. So yeah, it's, I read yesterday about some of the institutions that have decided to also reduce their staff complement. As a result, one can imagine how many are going to be added onto the list of unemployed and the families that are going to suffer as a result.
I think the story you tell, Tata Ramohemi Motshekwa, is that the changes that this virus have brought about far exceed its impact on people's physical health. It also goes to people's mental strength, and it also reaches right down to people's financial state of health. And just to go through the numbers quickly, maybe to give people joining us a refresher on what we are dealing with. South Africa is number 7th in the world. Last week it was sitting on number 6th. We are now one place down, which is an improvement. We are now 7th in the world in terms of the number of infections that have been registered. We are sitting at 638,517 infections that have been confirmed. And we have a fairly a positive recovery rate, which is now sitting at 88.3%, which in numbers is 563,891 people who have recovered from COVID. The death count is 14,889. It's by no means a little number. It could have been anyone. And those of you who are sitting here with us having this conversation could have been part of the statistics. We know of doctors who have lost their lives. We know of health workers who have lost their lives. with all that knowledge, with all that experience, they've lost their lives regardless of all of that. And these are the numbers we are looking at. At some point, we were averaging 10,741 infections a day, with Gauteng being the epicenter of this virus. And so it is by no means a small thing. It is a very serious thing. And quickly, before I go to our respondent to wrap up this conversation, I want to give Dr. Lerato an opportunity to say to us the mental strength required, and whether anyone and everyone can master it, the mental strength required to beat this virus. And what would you advise anyone who's dealing with it from a professional's point of view? What thoughts they have to maintain, what habits they have to pick up? And obviously, scientifically it's said to develop a habit, you need to develop it over 21 days. Do you even have enough time during dealing with the virus to develop a habit with that timeline? What would you advise, Dr. Lerato?
Yes, so I think the most cruel thing about this this illness is that you have to self-isolate, and it is during that self-isolation that the mind can then start, acting up. And said earlier on that you start hearing the pot plant responding back to you, or you start hearing the washing machine talking to you, then you know that your anxiety levels have gone to an extent now of altering your reality testing. Not everybody is able to do this, the positive self-talk. And that is why, even though they, scientists are advocating for social distancing and self-isolation, do not stop communicating with the outside world. Those people that know family members or friends who are in quarantine or in self-isolation, please do check up on them on the regular. And checking up is not, hey, how's it? Checking up is, good morning. How did you sleep? How are you feeling? And emotionally, are you worrying a lot? So you have to ask those emotion-based questions. It's easier said than done. When I found myself in that situation, I think I was fortunate in the sense that, like the Reverend said, my husband took care of me. He chose to self-isolate with me because I couldn't do anything for myself because of the sheer fatigue that I had. So at least I had that warm body with me that could talk to me and could, check on me, are you okay, and that. But as a mental health care provider, having been involved in going into the COVID wards, and talking to patients, all that a person needs at that time when you are in isolation and you are facing a 50-50 chance of your survival or your mortality, you just need somebody to talk to, somebody to remind you that you matter, somebody to remind you that you have so much to live for. Because like I experienced, it wasn't that my chest was blocked, that I could not breathe, but it was because breathing took up too much energy. So it was easier to just stop breathing because I just did not have the energy. So you can imagine if you don't have somebody next to you who nudges you to say, hey, breathe, or somebody next to you who reminds you of just how special you are and how much you mean to people. So it's that basic thing, and it's what we call cognitive therapy, where we try and change and replace the automatic negative thinking with positive thinking,
I think it's good advice that you're giving us, especially dealing with a disease or an illness where you know the outcome is either you're going to live or you're going to die. And it's something when you're dealing with flu. Flu, I'm going to live, and so obviously the strain on your mind is less than when you're dealing with a disease where the mortality rate depends on either the virus dying on you or you dying. Now, I want to give our panelists a last opportunity to give us parting shot words to our audience on the subject before we give our respondent on what has been the experience with the advisory committee, with the work that they've been doing in the provincial war room dealing with the pandemic in Gauteng. Parting shot, Methandiwe.
Thank you, Program Director. I just want to say that as much as now we talked about the mental health, I want to share maybe my experience and the ref, because we were chatting before we go in, that we take it for granted, with all due respect to research, that after, say, 8 days, it's no more infectious, or 10 days, which now we were releasing people after 10 days. I just want to say this, after 10 days, you might not be infectious, but that does not mean you are not sick. Because Rev was saying here to me that it was on day number 12 that he went and be admitted in the hospital. And in my case, I stayed on site, in the isolation site, for at least 10 days from the onset. And I could feel I'm not getting any better. So I've just then said, can I go home and self-isolate at home? Which, due respect, my husband was then doing everything, scared as he was, because he's a teacher, he knows nothing about health, so he had to believe me when I'm saying, after these days, I am not infectious. But the discussion that was going between everyone, it was, why are you not infectious, but you are worse sick? Because I got worse sick. I was very, very, very sick. I didn't go to hospital because I felt not necessary, because there's no medication per se. Maybe I could still stay home and self-medicate with all the vitamins and everything. But there is no way that, and I started understanding better that we discharge people and some will start trying to negotiate and say, can I go back to work maybe after 4 days and what, and said, no, according to me, I can only write for you that tomorrow you are ready to go back to work. You are not well. You can be even more sick even if you are not infectious. So I think that should be taken into account, that there is no one formula, there's no therefore in the situation of COVID, because people experience it differently and the symptoms are differently. And like the doctor was saying, it's difficult to breathe. In my case and a lot of other people that I engage with, it felt like there was a horse or a donkey. Somebody said an elephant was on top of you, because once you lie on your your back, you're trying to breathe, and then you want to sit up quickly to get a air passage opened. Then this thing pulls you down, and maybe that's when people give up and say it's not worth it anymore. So there is the element of being sick over and above being positive.
Parting shots, and Paul?
Advice, just filter out what people are saying. There's a lot of people that will tell you nonsense, so to say, for lack of a better word. People will advise you, and they're not even doctors. They are not qualified. They do not know anything about the virus, so to say, and you still listen to them. And also, with taking of treatments or medication, remember the body that you are bombarding with medication is the same body that has to clear out the system at the end of the day. So it doesn't make sense. If you don't have a headache, don't take medication for a headache. Don't drink Lingana if you're not experiencing chest pains. Treat what you are experiencing and don't just take medication for the mere fact that there is medication. That's the biggest thing, because we would get advice that didn't make sense. People would, and because it's a pandemic and it's the first time that it's happening, everyone wants to have an opinion that makes sense. Just filter out that information and deal with what you know you're experiencing. That's just my parting words. Yes. And there's more to live for in life.
Thank you, Paul. Rev?
I think for me, it's not actually more personal. I think it's the role that the church can play. One of the things is that COVID has brought a lot of stigma in the community. And as a church, we need to be given that platform to begin to address the issues of COVID to people so that no one is stigmatized out there. I feel sometimes that probably through the words, we have learned new words in the past 5 months or 6 months the isolations and all those things, the words that we never spoke about, the words like PPEs and all that stuff. You know, those are new words, quarantine and all that stuff. And some of these words are the words that begin to create stigma to people. Probably we need to lighten up on the way that we converse. And then the second thing, I think as a church again, somehow I feel as we need a space whereby people need to come in and be comforted and guided and everything, because a church is a place of healing. And I feel that lockdown and COVID has taken that away from people. And many people are dying lonely. And you find that. So now as things are opening up, we know that we have got a bigger role to play. And because we have got disintegrated families now, we have got disintegrated communities. We have got families that have lost their parents, families that have lost people, and they are hurting deep down. And as ministers of the church, we need to come in now and begin to bring healing into those people. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Rev. Those are comforting words to hear. Dadera Mohemi Motshegwa, parting shot. Your mic is off. Turn on your mic.
Thanks. Can you hear me now? I'm saying there is still hope, and there is belief in life for everyone. I still believe that with all the research that's happening, a cure will be found, but it's just a matter of everyone respecting all the guidelines and the advice that we get from the medical side, that we should respect the instructions given, so to speak, if it's an instruction. But people don't have to mingle in the way that it happened, because with me, it's as a result of having been to a funeral. And the belief that there's no such a thing that when you're in a crowd, you're not going to be infected or something. It's not there. We need to respect all the guidelines and what the government tells us as far as trying to reduce the level of infections that we are having in the society.
Thank you very much, Dr. Motshegwa. Dr. Lerato, parting shot. I need you to touch on something. There has been a conversation, and while you're closing out, it seems someone has been vindicated with the use of hydroxychloroquine, and I mentioned this a lot in my conversations with people. As you make your parting shot, maybe touch on that as well before we give over to our respondent. Are you still with us? It seems you are frozen in time.
Yeah, my up a bit, yes. Okay, I think it's back now. I missed what you had said.
I was saying in your parting shot, perhaps make a comment about the efficacy of hydroxychloroquine, the conversation that has been overtaking the world by storm. And now Italy going ahead and using it in their treatment regimen. Just in the parting shot, maybe make space for that.
Okay, I think it would be very irresponsible of me to give comment on that. I'm not an infectious control doctor, and I'm not a specialist physician. I can only really give advice on my line of work. As a psychiatrist, yes, I'm trained as a medical doctor, but I don't go into such depth when it comes to new curative medications. So I wouldn't be able to give a proper advice or comment on that. But I think in passing, we need to not forget, even though we are now on level 2, that COVID-19 is still around. Please let us not forget that. The virus is still here. It is still highly infectious. Those people who have recovered from it, you are not now Chuck Norris and you can go about thinking that you can never be infected again. You can get reinfected. So we need to be extra careful. We need to protect ourselves. I don't like the word social distancing because it means to me that you have to isolate yourself socially, but rather physical distancing. Maintain the physical distance that has been advised. Make sure that you wash your hands. Sanitizer is not the be-it of it all. Water and soap, just wash your hands. Avoid finicking with your face so that you can protect yourself. And also, if you feel that your anxiety levels have suddenly gone up, as compared to what they were before, talk to somebody, talk to a healthcare professional who can help, with managing the anxiety. And anxiety can manifest itself also as difficulty sleeping. A lot of people who never had a diagnosable psychiatric disorder, once lockdown and COVID-19 pandemic started, and then they also then get admitted. Once they are healed from the COVID-19, are now diagnosable with a psychiatric condition, be it major depressive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, or even anxiety disorder. So we need to break the stigma. We need to talk, so that you can get healing as a nation.
So much, Dr. Lerato. Prof?
Okay, thank you so much. Let me just start by saying, I really want to thank you guys for being so brave to come and share that you know what you went through. It's not easy because of people were so scared to be stigmatized. And I also want to thank Dr. Ikalafeng, Lebu, and Dr. Dlamini, who some of you, they managed to get hold of you and to interview you. Hence, I had to screen to make sure who wants to come, because some of the people, they were so scared that even if they know that you guys have been cleared, is it really worth it for them to come and mention this? Because they were so scared of stigma. Thank you, Mpo. I know TU, they will be you going back to school, and I know they're gonna run away, completely not want to see you, but at least you have educated them. Hence, I wanted to thank you for that. We have learned a lot, and in terms of what people are taking, and people sometimes they don't understand. You keep on taking things, you're thinking that is preventative. You are hurting yourself. You're going to be resistant. And I don't know if people understand what is preventative. If you keep on taking that overdose of Lengana, and it happens that the pharmaceutical company, they manufacture a drug that has got Lengana ingredients, you have already damaged your body because you've been taking this. Then you end up making your body to be resistant to some of the things. We must just be very careful on what we are taking as preventative. That can be also dangerous. I've also learned in terms of the medication that everybody was trying to use. And again, if I've never had COVID-19, I can advise based on my medical background. But if you don't have a medical background, please don't talk about it because you also don't know what you're going to say. And this is where now the people will start talking about take this, and you keep on taking, take it. Even if you don't have a headache, you keep on taking. By then you're thinking that you are preventing. Meanwhile, you are actually causing some resistance to yourself. I guess the challenges that we all have currently is because of we don't. The antibody immunity is where we struggle, because I had a meeting with Vermaak last week with their antibody testing that they were using. Somebody who was positive tested negative for that antibody. That becomes a challenge as well. So it does not necessarily mean that even if you were positive, when they do your antibody will be negative. That becomes a challenge. And these are the kind of things that people started to learn and to understand that that does not necessarily mean that if you had it, you're not going to have it. Your antibody has built. There's nothing like that. So from what, this is just what I can also even summarize, that clearly this virus, it will humble you. And from what Dr. Lerato was saying, imagine she is a psychiatrist, And she is Tandi, who's also social psychologist by background, which I know her, but they couldn't cancel themselves. We've got a pastor, Muruti, couldn't cancel himself. You see, so you could see this is not something that we really need to take it very light. It's something that when somebody is suffering from that, there are so many things that the person is going through. I've also learned a lot that sometimes when you talk to yourself is okay, but immediately you start hearing washing machine talking to you, then they must take you to Dr. Lerato. Definitely, they must take to Dr. Lerato that there is something wrong with you. So I hope this is one of the things that we're learning in terms of that. And I'm glad that reference mentioned that vitamins, you can have a rejection of vitamin C, and this is an example that it happens. And what fascinating, why did you want to go to Charlotte Maxeke Hospital? I'm excited that you mentioned that, and because this time now I'm wearing the Department of Health hat, not the TVT hat. The fact that you went to Charlotte Maxeke Hospital, then clearly it shows that we are doing good in terms of that, because I know the teaching hospitals, they are always the best. I'm not saying the others for now. So thank you for choosing Charlotte Maxeke Hospital. I will tell those doctors that they are doing extremely well. In terms of what Sister Ndwen mentioned, something very crucial, and I don't know if people managed to follow it up. Our toll-free number is not working. The department toll-free number that the people are supposed to use it when they call, it is not working. And I'm talking about the people who were infected July? Yeah, so clearly it means we as a Department of Health, we need to go back to the drawing board and to see what's wrong with the toll-free number that is not working. Because due to the fact that she used to work at the quarantine, she ended up being the toll-free. You see, so that is one of the things that we really need to take care of that, and to make sure that going back, we need to report all these things and to test it, to pilot it, to make sure that it is working. Dr. Ramhemi mentioned things about the funeral, and I think it's about time that we need to change things completely. In our culture, we've got a tendency of when somebody, they just said that somebody passed on, they start picking the bag, they move into that house, and then they start wanting to get literasim fast. I think it's about time. COVID has humbled us. COVID has taught us so many things. I think we have to stop doing those things. Whether or not you will have to help even the churches when you guys, you preach in there that yes, it's culture, but now we can see that there's no need for us to do that, because of here it is happening. You attend the funeral, you're thinking that you're going there to assist, then you end up contacting the disease. So those are the kind of things that one has to do. In terms of the word that you are using, you are very right by saying we need to lessen out how we converse, like how we converse, how we talk to people, and how we talk about social distancing instead of saying physical distancing. And this are the kind of things that we need to start saying, because even when you go to the restaurant is still talking about the social distancing, you know, and some restaurants, they don't even practice it. I mean, we know that, and this is where sometimes us, when we go to the restaurant, we must practice the physical distancing, even if we see that they are not practicing it, because it's you at the end of the day who is going to be affected or infected with that. On those kind of ways that I just want to thank you guys again for availing yourself. Also, thank you to the viewers and to the listeners, and thank you for the department for hosting us. Oh, without Bafuzi, our facilitator. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate it. I am now going to call Ntate Molotwane, the CEO, who is going to do the closing. If you want to say something before I call him, you're more than welcome. But I can't stop thanking every one of you, and also if I'm not going to thank, what do you guys call them, the journalists or the media from the Premier's office? Yes. I hope I've used the right word. I really want to thank them, you know, for organizing this, and they were there for us. Whenever I keep on emailing them, they were there, and I really want to appreciate them and to thank you so much for them.
Thank you so much, Prof. And I think this was a very fruitful discussion, a conversation that needed to happen on the fact that the illness can be overcome, but we need to be responsible, follow regulations, follow treatment protocols if we get infected. And also remember, physical distancing. This is the conversation I've always also had, whether it's physical distancing or social distancing that we must practice. But I think Dr. Lerato has clarified it nicely for us. We must practice physical distancing to reduce the chances of getting infected. Let us not forget that the numbers we are looking at are very serious. You could be a statistic or you could be not a statistic, depending on your behavior. But if it happens that you contracted, do not panic, follow treatment protocols, and do all that is necessary for you not to pass it on to the next person, your family, your close friends, your colleagues, and anyone who's close to you. With those words, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. It was a blast having you with a serious conversation, a serious topic, and yet you've been with us here, and I want to thank you so much for hanging around with us. Let me hand it over to the CEO who's here with us to give a parting shot, close the session for us, and everyone could go about with their whole day.
Good day, yes. Good afternoon, and thanks for the opportunity. I have got not much to say. Safe to say I was in an executive meeting and I was summoned here to say there's a very hectic engagement that's happening downstairs and you must go be party to it. But I must just take the opportunity to confirm some of the presentations and the inputs that have been made. I must say, I've always battled with this physical versus social because it's got some negative connotation, especially in the South African context of what we mean socially, because we've got social gaps quite wide. In fact, we've got the biggest inequality coefficient in the world. So if you just say socially distancing, means those that are better off must remain better off. It could be, and I'm glad that under a normal context has been clarified, and I think physical. It's just because we give each other space, this virus is just spread by droplets, therefore we're making So, and I'm glad that there are pastors. Maybe just before I talk to this pastoral issue and as part of my closing remarks to this event is that 27 weeks ago, we started as a Gauteng provincial government a COVID-19 response team, and one is none of us knew what we were doing because there's never been a pandemic of this magnitude after the declaration of disaster. And on weekly basis, on daily basis, without fail for 27 weeks at 8 o'clock and then at 3 o'clock, we met, we generated reports so that we can brief the minister to produce numbers. And it became a numbers thing. So the disease was about numbers because we're a technocrat. Number of recoveries, I can tell you from the top of my head that there's been 3 million tests conducted, there's been 13,000 deaths, there's been 181,000 recoveries. It's a numbers thing. But then I come here and I join the discussion. This is about humans. These are lived experiences. And I think that's what should be the take-home message, that there are people's lives that have been affected. But I think we must also then say we're going to have a new normal. And that's where I'd say, and interestingly, just to quote the Bible, because just doing as a pastor, you must accommodate that. To say that there's a saying in Luke somewhere, it says about to whom much is given, much is expected. And I don't think it's a coincidence, having listened to the diverse group of recoveries for whom their numbers, because they've always been. Now I've not been able to put faces to the disease. Is that your complexity and your diversity actually puts you there. And there's a reason, probably, that you yourself are sitting here today, and it's something that we should continue. Let it not end here. Beyond here, we are in an executive meeting upstairs. We're talking about how do we go back to normal beyond COVID. And this new normal is going to be that you might not have as many people in the church, pastor, as we wanted, but there are mediums of still engaging. As the students at the university, the modalities, we've been able to run this command center. This meeting gets attended by 183 people, but not less than 30 people sitting here. The 180 are sitting on the cloud, and they participate daily. So there's a new norm that is being created, and I think it will be irresponsible of us, even beyond COVID, to go try and do things the way we've been doing. So, colleagues, I really had this. For me, it's an honor and a privilege, one, to meet the faces of those people that have been affected, that have recovered, and I wish you all the best. But I hope this is the beginning of the long-term conversations, and we'll hope have a discussion about how do we partner with the department to ensuring that the sustainability of the message that you are trying to convey, let it not end here. Kelebo, thanks so much.